So we've got Nigel Farage with us now, head of Reform UK, of course. Nigel, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So now we have Keir Starmer, the man who doesn't like immigration. He says he believes that he needs to reduce it significantly. I haven't found anybody that believes him. I'm assuming you don't either.
I love the Times cartoon today. Have you seen it?
I haven't actually, no.
Yeah, but it's Keir Starmer in a tweed jacket, a checked shirt, a pair of yellow corduroy trousers. Remind you of anybody? with a pint of bitter and a cigarette.
Well, I mean, people said if you'd actually taken his words and put them into your mouth, people would have no doubt castigated you for being a ghastly right-wing, horrible piece of work that wanted to do nasty things to foreigners.
Oh, if I'd said a country of strangers, I mean, my God, I'd need armed support to walk down the street.
Absolutely right. It's incredible, though, isn't it? I mean, I just asked Robert Jenrick. He didn't really have an answer. How is it?
The political earthquake that hit Westminster today didn't begin with fireworks. It started with routine debates and familiar rhetoric. But behind the scenes, pressure had been mounting for weeks. That pressure finally broke through when it became clear that Prime Minister Keir Starmer no longer held the confidence of Parliament. In a rare and dramatic display of cross-party consensus, MPs from every corner of the chamber effectively turned their backs on his leadership.
I have ambitions for reform to be the biggest party at the next general election.
But you have to bring in the Tories. You have to do something with the Tories to get to that position, don't you? Or you think you can somehow get reform to the biggest party without the Conservative support? It just doesn't seem to add up.
Well, no, nothing I've ever done's added up. Fighting to leave the European Union didn't add up. There are many unlikely things that happen in the world of politics. Look, we've just finished a general election. You know, I'm laying out a 5-year plan with a very, very capable, competent young businessman called Zia Youssef, who's now chairman of the party, and we are building a national political party. And whatever happens, happens. But I do think this. I do think that the growth of reform, if it happens in the way that I believe it can.
The Speaker of the House, leaning on legal precedent and guided by the mood of the chamber, formally acknowledged that Starmer's time was up. But the real shock came next. The formal recognition of Nigel Farage as Britain's new Prime Minister. There was no public vote, no dramatic campaign trail. Instead, it was Parliament itself that executed the transfer of power, bypassing the usual democratic machinery in favour of swift political recalibration. This wasn't just a resignation, it was a collapse. A government brought down not by scandal, but by the realisation that it no longer represented the country.
How powerful is Nigel Farage? He's the man behind Brexit.
Independence Day!
Nigel Farage is leader of the right-wing Reform UK party, and he is now in pursuit of power. Reform UK only has 4 MPs, but its support in the polls is rising. And since the end of March 2025, The Economist's poll tracker has put it narrowly in first place. This success was cemented in the local elections which took place in parts of England on May the 1st. Reform scored some notable victories, and most notably...
How is it possible that we can have a Prime Minister who can so blatantly lie and so blatantly reverse a view that he's had all of his life, which has been borne out by the work that he's done as an immigration lawyer, as a human rights lawyer, as the head of the CPS. He's physically stopped people from being deported from this country, dangerous criminals. How on earth can he pretend that he now believes something completely different?
Well, absolutely. He's a complete fraud in every single way, but of course it typifies modern professional career politics.
Yeah.
Don't believe in the blooming thing. It's the pursuit of power for the sake of power rather than what you can do with it. So look, what he has done, though, is he's made a very big strategic error when it comes to the left of British politics. Yeah. You might have known...
The downfall didn't come out of nowhere. Starmer's government had been weathering growing discontent for months. The early cracks formed around controversial policies, particularly on taxation, digital surveillance and civil liberties, that alienated both progressives and centrists. The very base that once rallied behind Labour began to drift, accusing the leadership of abandoning working-class concerns in favour of bureaucratic control and technocratic detachment. Public frustration only grew louder. Protests spread across major cities, polling numbers nosedived, and Labour's own MPs started to speak out. The government's silence on civil unrest and economic strain didn't help.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We at Reform, a party that is alive and kicking, very much enjoyed your speech on Monday. You seem to be learning a very great deal from us. But can I encourage you, please, to go further as a matter of national security? As a matter of national security. Over the weekend, an illegal immigrant from Iran, who we believe came by boat, was arrested in the north of England on serious charges of terrorism. Since the speech on Monday, 1,000 young, undocumented young males have crossed the English Channel. Does the Prime Minister agree? Now is the time to declare the situation in the English Channel as a national security emergency.
It wasn't my speech, it was the Prime Minister's.
Mr. Speaker, the situation is serious. The last government lost control of the borders. We are taking powers. The Borders Bill, precisely to his point, the Borders Bill is the first bill to give terrorism-like powers to law enforcement, precisely so that we can get in before the crimes are committed, before people get to this country. That's right. This is the most far-reaching provision ever for law enforcement to defend and secure our borders. And that's why it is extraordinary that he, of all people, voted against it. And sooner or later he's going to explain it.
Amanda Martin.
Within Labour's ranks, discipline broke down, backbenchers voiced rebellion, party defectors went public, and in the end, it wasn't a single scandal that brought the walls crashing down. It was the steady erosion of faith, from within and without, that left Starmer's leadership with no ground to stand on. When the Speaker finally addressed the chamber, there was a sharp shift in atmosphere. What followed was not merely symbolic, it was historic. For the first time in modern memory, a sitting Prime Minister was effectively removed not by the ballot box, but by collective parliamentary rejection. Starmer's authority had evaporated, and in his place rose the figure many had dismissed for years as an outsider, Nigel Farage. Farage's ascent was fast-tracked by a rare moment of unity among disillusioned MPs. While unconventional, the Speaker's decision was constitutionally valid, reflecting the will of a body that no longer supported the existing government. Starmer didn't resist. He knew the numbers were no longer on his side. Within hours, he released a short statement confirming he wouldn't contest the ruling. No televised defence, no press conference, just a quiet retreat. As for Farage, his return to the political stage was as bold as expected. He stepped up, not as a protest voice, but as the incoming Prime Minister, armed with populist momentum, widespread name recognition, and a promise to overhaul what he called a broken system. Within hours of the announcement, the Labour Party descended into chaos. Senior officials, who had once been Starmer's closest allies, were either missing in action or visibly shaken. The corridors of Labour HQ turned into panic zones, with emergency meetings, resignations, and internal messaging spiralling into confusion. Some staff reportedly left without warning. Others stayed only to demand answers that no one could give. The party's regional leaders and union backers quickly made their dissatisfaction known. Some called for a full restructuring, while others openly blamed Starmer's inner circle for isolating the party from its grassroots base. What was once seen as a steady, technocratic leadership was now being condemned as detached and out of touch. Outside Parliament, the reaction was just as divided and just as intense. Massive crowds formed almost instantly. Some celebrated the moment as long overdue, a wake-up call to the establishment. Others stood in protest, accusing Parliament of undermining democracy. No matter where people stood politically, everyone agreed on one thing: something seismic had just occurred. The news didn't just stay within the borders of the UK. Within minutes, headlines around the world lit up. Governments scrambled to make sense of what had just unfolded in Westminster. European leaders, many of whom had clashed with Farage during the Brexit era, immediately convened behind closed doors. The mood was cautious, with quiet concerns about the potential unravelling of existing agreements and diplomatic norms. In Washington, the US State Department issued a short but telling statement urging calm and stability. Analysts on both sides of the Atlantic speculated about what this leadership shift might mean for NATO coordination, trade, and international climate commitments. After years of carefully mending post-Brexit relationships, Farage's appointment posed a brand new set of uncertainties. Markets reacted fast. The pound dipped sharply in early trading before levelling out once it became clear that Farage would not immediately dissolve existing fiscal policies. Investors, though jittery, held back on panic. But one thing was obvious: confidence would hinge on Farage's first major policy steps in the coming days. Farage wasted no time stepping into the role. Within a single day, he began assembling the framework for a new government. But instead of defaulting to the usual Westminster veterans, he cast a wider net. Sources close to his team revealed outreach efforts targeting a mix of former Conservative MPs, independents, and prominent voices from outside traditional politics. His message was clear: this would not be business as usual. Farage intended to form a cabinet that could speak directly to ordinary citizens, not just party insiders. Early rumours pointed to appointments from the military, small business sectors, and public service circles. This shift was more than symbolic. It was a calculated rejection of the establishment's revolving door of career politicians. Still, challenges loomed. Forming a stable coalition with such a diverse cast of figures would require careful negotiation and compromise. But for now, Farage had the numbers, the mandate, and the momentum to shape the early days of his administration on his own terms. While Farage moved swiftly to consolidate power, Labour was left to pick up the pieces. The party that once claimed to represent the backbone of Britain found itself lost in its own reflection. Calls for a full leadership contest erupted almost immediately. Activists demanded a membership-wide vote, while others pushed for a deep policy audit to determine where things had gone so wrong. Some feared a permanent fracture if the party failed to course-correct fast. The internal debate wasn't just about replacing Starmer, it was about redefining Labour's purpose. Should it double down on its technocratic path, or return to its working-class roots? As pressure mounted, factions began to clash behind the scenes, with unions and regional leaders demanding greater influence in the next phase. Meanwhile, the Conservative Party, still reeling from its own identity crisis and a series of electoral blows, was left sidelined. Some of its MPs expressed cautious interest in Farage's coalition, while others worried about being politically outflanked. Populism had just seized the centre stage, and both legacy parties were forced to reckon with the reality that voters were done waiting politely for change. As the dust begins to settle, one thing is certain: Britain has crossed a political threshold few saw coming. The traditional machinery of leadership, the slow marches toward elections, the cautious reshuffles, was swept aside in favour of immediate action. Farage now stands at the centre of it all. Can he hold together a coalition built on rebellion rather than party loyalty? Will he deliver on promises to fix what he calls a broken system? Or will the challenges of governing grind his movement down before it even starts? For voters, this isn't just about a new Prime Minister. It's about whether this sudden upheaval marks the beginning of long overdue reform, or simply a louder version of the same old playbook. Parliament has changed. Power has shifted. But the deeper transformation of trust, of governance, of identity has only just begun. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more updates like this.